douchebags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and it is finally time for the 23rd edition of Rapid Fire Reviews, the series where I talk about albums and EPs that I didn't necessarily have time to be able to talk about in full videos. As you're going to be able to tell by the amount of albums and EPs that I'm going to be talking about in this video, my list of things that I want to review is really lengthy, and it only gets lengthier and lengthier every single year. Sadly, I'm just a man, and I don't have as much time as I'd like to be doing album and EP reviews. Even if I was somehow able to do one review a day, I still don't think I'd be able to cover as much stuff as I want to throughout the course of the year. I listen to a lot of music and there's a lot of things to talk about, but I can only get to so much. Which is why this series is so great, which is why I love doing rapid fire reviews so much. It's fun to just give some quick thoughts and give you guys a quick rundown of what I've been listening to throughout the year. The problem is I never really know when to stop adding to my reviews list, so I think in 2019 I'm going to move forward by doing this series every month if I can. That way these videos can be a little bit more in depth and you guys can hopefully get a little bit more out of the series. But for now, here I am at the end of 2018, struggling to fit everything I possibly can into the end of the year, and I've got a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. I've definitely got some mixed feelings about this album. In my book, it's definitely an improvement over Getter's last EP, but it's also just not that interesting. Sure, there are some high points on this album that are really raw and emotionally charged. I also really enjoyed the more EDM-influenced tracks on this album, probably more than I would have thought that I would. But I feel like people are over-crediting this album as this massive, genre-bending change in sound for Getter, when in reality, the majority of this album sounds like it was cut from the exact same cloth as his Planet Neutral album. Given that Andrew Bayer has been co-producing for Above and Beyond for a little while, I can comfortably say that this album felt a little bit more interesting, a little bit more captivating than some of A&B's recent stuff. I can't say I absolutely loved this album, but there were a lot of moments that really caught my ear. I'll be honest here, I don't like this album as much as Blue Neighborhood, and in fact it's not even really close. I guess I just don't really care for the sonic shift in sound. I don't think Troye's vocal performances here are any more stellar than they were on the last album, but I will say there were some lyrics on this album that definitely impressed me, made me kind of step back and say like, whoa, did that just happen? This is some of the best and most respectable house music I've heard in a while, and I'd highly suggest you check it out. This album is interesting, to say the least. I'm completely being honest here, I like this one more than Afrojack's debut. It made me strangely nostalgic for a time period in dance music that I honestly was never that crazy about. Maybe I just miss the days when dance music was more simple and I didn't have to try super hard to find artists that really stood out to me. This album did a great job of bringing me back to that time period, if nothing else. I've been keeping up with Sinjin Hawke's music a little bit more since I listened to his debut album First Opus, but I can't honestly say I loved this project. This EP is still pretty wonky, and don't get me wrong, it is enjoyable, but I don't think it wowed me quite as much. This album has some really cool tunes on it, and in a lot of places reminded me why I love the current state of drum and bass so much. I would definitely suggest at least skimming through it to find some tunes that you might like a lot too. Personally, I think this is a step up from the debut album. It's a bit more pop influenced, but it's definitely more vibrant and I feel like more palatable. I really enjoy the wobbly UK dubstep style that Dirt Monkey is going for on this album, and though it can feel pretty redundant at points, I think this album has some great standout moments. I recently had a revelation that I just don't enjoy tear-out music all that much. I don't really understand it, I guess. I'm not going to say it's bad, it's just not really my cup of tea, and I don't really understand the context in which it's meant to be enjoyed. That being said, I actually thought this album was a halfway decent listen, a bit more Americanized than a lot of Code's past work, but that made it a bit of an easier pill to swallow for me. This album is pretty cool, and while I can't say I'm absolutely hooked on Orbital yet, I've definitely opened up my scope a little bit more to listen to them after hearing this album. This EP, in short, is great. I think I finally understand why people like Aphex Twin so much. Definitely opened me up to listen to more of Aphex Twin's discography, which I'm really really excited to dig into. But for now, I'd say that though this EP is short, it's definitely sweet, and I enjoyed pretty much every moment of it. I gotta say, I'm really glad that F.O.O.L is back, even if it's not in the form of the album he initially promised. This EP contains what is, in my book, some of the best work he's done in a while. I especially enjoyed the title track. If you like that dark, kind of encapsulating French synthwave and electro sound, I would definitely suggest you check out this EP. Given that I actually liked a couple of the poppier singles leading up to this album, and that I liked David Guetta's whole Jack Back concept quite a bit, I thought this album was going to be a great listen, but I was sorely mistaken. Neither of the album's sides do anything that's all that interesting. Why David Guetta didn't do an album that had his pop side meeting his house side head-on is beyond me. I think that would have been much more interesting than the album that we got. If nothing else, I guess this album made me want to go back and listen to One Love, so there's something. And here we are with a solid sophomore attempt from the Knox. This album is fun, danceable, catchy. I don't think it's quite as enjoyable as their debut, but it definitely caught my attention. This is the first TobyMac album where I can confidently say I didn't really enjoy at all. I really wish the guy would just retire. I think he had a great track record up until a few years ago. Now the music just sounds fake and uninspired. You guys should probably know that Oliverse has been one of my favorite artists to watch throughout the entire year, debatably even my favorite, and though I didn't feel that this EP was quite as fantastic as a lot of the other stuff Oliverse has done this year, I think it's very much still worth a listen and showcases a lot of the reasons why I love his music so much. Straight up, this album is near incredible and definitely one of my favorites of the year. I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in depth soon, wink wink nudge nudge, but I will say if you haven't listened to this one yet, I would strongly suggest giving it a listen. Kid is such a Porter stan, it honestly annoys the heck out of me, and even though this EP doesn't have me entirely convinced otherwise, I mean, I could hear some definite Porter and Virtual Self influences across the entire project, but it does see Kid somewhat developing a signature sound, which is cool. And I actually like the drum and bass tune Creator's Flower quite a bit. GUNSHIP is one of the few acts that I feel like can really pull off synthwave in a genuine and refreshing way, and this album is a prime example of that. Definitely give it a listen. This album to me is kind of the new Path of Totality, in that it sees a well-known rocker working with a slew of different EDM producers, though this album goes way beyond the scope of a few names in like dubstep and electro. It's really diverse, yet it still works as a solid body of work, and you know, it's a pretty fun listen too. Speaking of the Atlas Underground, I see it's on Anthony Fantano's 10 Worst Albums of the Year, so I know I'm on the right track. Definitely did not expect to enjoy this album as much as I did. I can't say much beyond the fact that for me, this is a great pop album with some great production. The tune that this guy did with Rez was my introduction to his music, and I honestly didn't care for that song a whole lot, so I didn't care to check out any of his work beyond it, but I came across some of the tracks on this EP, and I can honestly say I'm a fan now. And this EP is even better, so definitely keep an eye out for Deathpact. Alright, so as you guys know, I'm a big LoneMoon fan. I think she's got a ton of talent. My problem is that she just keeps putting out hip-hop albums that are either on par or subpar to her previous projects. I honestly don't really see myself enjoying another LoneMoon album until she puts out a record that kind of spans across all of her abilities simultaneously. Like a hip-hop album that goes way beyond the scope that this album has, instrumentally and lyrically. Hey, I really like the story of this album, but I can't say I enjoy the music of it really all that much. Hey, this EP is alright, but it doesn't really capture my ears as much as the last album did. Can't really say I loved this EP. It feels just as much like a messy compilation as his last one did, and I can't really say I loved a single song on this EP either. I guess I thought the tune with Blinders was pretty cool, and it was really cool to see Waiting for Tomorrow finally released, but beyond that, I just wasn't all that interested in this EP. This album is really pretty cool, and I honestly think it does a great job of kind of bridging the gap between math rock fans and like EDM fans. In light of that, I would highly suggest it. I think I liked this EP about as much as I thought I would. Didn't enjoy any of the songs quite as much as I did the lead single Numb, but I do have to say this is some of Eddie's best work to date. I have followed Conro pretty closely through every stage of his career, from his electro stuff to his future bass stuff on Monster Cat to the more pop-leaning stuff he's doing now. And can I say this EP is really like Conro stepping any closer to his true self than it is like just another phase of his career? I can't really say for sure, but this stuff is definitely enjoyable. I think this is definitely, when it comes to full-length projects, this is definitely the best work he's put out to date. I'm not absolutely in love with it, and I don't like any of the songs on this album nearly as much as City Lights, but I do think it's a step in the right direction. I do like this EP, and for a lot of the same reasons that I liked Underscore's latest EP. It's very creative, fun, and spunky bedroom beats, which make up a very immersive, smooth experience. I think, though, that this EP could have benefited from having more of a story-driven narrative. I can see what Arrested Youth was trying to do with this album, but I honestly did not enjoy it at all. The lyrics and the vocal performances in my book are just not that great, and the mixdowns to me are just absolute garbage. After this EP, I can say that I finally understand the hype around Ikali. This is good stuff. I guess I like the tune with Eden a lot. I like the part where Eden's on this EP. Boy, he did it! Matt Zo went back to his roots and basically showed everyone up. This music is fantastic. Yeah, I can see the hype around this album, and I would say this is my favorite work to come from the Joji moniker, but it's not really for me either. Like, I could not see myself regularly listening through this LP for any reason. Just a Gent is fantastic, and I'm just now starting to really appreciate him. This stuff is really cool, really unique, excellent production, the mixing is pristine. Yeah, I'd suggest this one. On a different note, I can't say I liked this EP all that much. Certainly not as much as Love Is Alive. This EP to me was a lot more bland and underwhelming and packed a lot less punches and surprises. This EP isn't bad, and I think people who generally enjoy Varian's aesthetic are going to vibe with this project. Personally, I really love the title track, but most of the other songs on this album don't really stick out to me all that much when compared to songs in the same genre. I'm excited to see where Varian's future takes him, but this EP to me is more of a stepping stone than a landmark. This album is a soundtrack, and a pretty good soundtrack at that. What exactly it's a soundtrack to is beyond me, because I couldn't really find any information about it, but it's a good soundtrack nonetheless. Can't really say I like this EP as much as German Engineering, and as you guys know, I didn't really care for that EP all that much anyway, but I did quite enjoy the two tunes with Leah Culver, especially Come With Me, and I think they could have a really cool thing going on. I'd like to see them do an EP or an album together. I think that'd be sweet. When I heard the intro to this album, I was thinking like, holy moly, this is gonna be Steve Aoki's best work ever, and as I digged deeper into the album, it just became more and more underwhelming. I mean, I guess the closer with Bill Nye was decent as well, but there wasn't a whole lot else on this album that really interested me. I can say that this is a halfway decent tropical house album, but I think it says something that my favorite song on the album is the Fast Car cover, which I didn't initially love all that much. I definitely enjoy it more now, but I don't think this album is great. This is the first project where I feel like I've really appreciated Weathen for all that he is. This project is insanely fun, yet insanely unique at the same time, and I can say I'm really excited for Volume 2. There are definitely some cool moments on this project, but I can't say in good faith that I enjoyed it nearly as much as, like, Left Is Right. I honestly do not understand the hype around this album. Like, here and there, I think Rufus Du Sol did do a great job of creating some really immersive atmospheres, but beyond that, this album to me was just very boring. I actually surprisingly really enjoyed this album. I think it's a huge step up from The Day Is My Enemy. Really takes me back to why The Prodigy is considered such an influential name in the electronic music world, and a lot of these tunes are just absolutely killer. Did not enjoy this one nearly as much as The Human Condition. To me, it feels like a scattered mess of stories that Jon Bellion is trying to compile from his life over the past couple years. And while the songs themselves, for the most part, to me are good, the album itself as a whole just isn't for me. Huge shout out to my dude Matt Van. If you guys have not checked out this EP yet, I would highly suggest you do. Love his musical and writing style, love his voice even more, and the features from Direct and Mr. Fiji Ouija give this album some definite crossover appeal with EDM fans too. This EP is solid, definitely not my favorite EP that Chime has put out this year. In fact, I'd say it's my least favorite of the three, but Coins is my jam, and I love Your Eyes as well, so it's worth a listen. This project to me is definitely better than Assorted Repetitions, but I would not put it above either of No Mana's first couple EPs. Sure, there are some interesting things going on here and there, but overall, It's definitely cool to see Haywire back, and though I don't think the songs in this EP are necessarily on par with a lot of my favorite music of his, I think it's really cool to just see him back on the map again and making tunes that he feels passionate about, and I'm not going to judge this one too harshly until I see the full panorama. I think the thing that made Clean Bandit so interesting to begin with, which was their classical music influence, is kind of missing on this album. Like, sure, it appears here and there, most notably in the song Symphony, which I can say I really enjoy that track, but for the most part, it's just pretty similar to what everyone else doing radio-friendly electro-pop is doing. Maybe it's a little bit more vibrant. I'd say I prefer it over most of the other stuff on the radio. Beautiful, euphoric, uplifting trance from one of the masters of the genre. I definitely didn't expect to love this one as much as I did, but check it out. This EP is pretty insane. I can't even articulate it. This album is also pretty insane. I can't really articulate it. Follow Me was really the only single from this EP that I paid much attention to, and that song really blew me away. I think it's one of the best tunes that Snails has ever written, so I was expecting a lot from this EP, and I've got to say there wasn't much in the way of, like, good music beyond that song. It's about on par with The Shell, but maybe even worse. I would highly suggest this album to anyone who's into more complex EDM subgenres like halftime and neurofunk. It definitely fits into that category, but it also combines a lot of elements of like funk, fusion, and jazz. This album is really a collision of two genres that I really enjoy, and you know, I like the result a lot. For once, it seems like Slander is actually trying to do something conceptual here. I see what they're trying to do here, mixing the melodic electro-pop sound with heavy dubstep drops, but the result is pretty much a steaming pile of garbage. The only instance in which it works in any capacity is the RIOT collaboration. This is an interesting direction for Slushy, and though when I first feasted my ears on this album I was completely opposed to it, I can say that the project is at least halfway decent, though if Slushy wants to continue down this kind of vibey R&B electronic influenced kind of sound, he's got a long way to go. Like, a long way. And finally, big surprise, Alan Walker put out a full-length album, which I kind of never expected to happen. And, you know, it's halfway decent. I think Faded is still the best song on the album, but it's halfway decent. And yeah, that about does it for this edition of Rapid Fire Reviews. Definitely look forward to some throwback reviews starting next week, and my top 10s of the year very soon after that. Anyway, I'm Landon Remixes. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon. Peace.